One of the wisest philosophers of our time, Ricky Bobby, once said, if you're not first, you're last.
Welcome to Leadership In, where we go beyond job titles to explore what leadership really looks like, on the ground and from people shaping the future of advertising, media, and tech. I'm Greg McDonald.
And I'm Jeff Wallenez. We're talking to senior leaders about the moments that tested them, the decisions that defined them, and what it really means to lead in an industry that's always changing. Today, we're talking to Nick Cote, VP and head of supply at TV Scientific. Nick has built a career at the intersection of early stage growth and go-to-market innovation. He's known for driving scale in the CTV space without losing sight of brand integrity and for leading teams through ambiguity with clarity and purpose. Today, we'll talk to Nick about what leadership looks like in hyper-growth environments, how to navigate the pressure to perform in emerging ad markets, and why trust matters more than ever. Nick.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So let's jump in. How do you usually introduce yourself at a dinner party?
Well, nowadays it's as a new dad. But no, typically I always try, and now with of course, dad joke, I typically pull out I'm a Pisces who likes long walks on the beach. But typically I just dive in and say, I oversee everything related to media partnerships. And that's been true for most of my career. Been on the buy side, sell side, but typically it's always working with media companies, whether they're digitally endemic publishers, broadcasters, streaming services, what have you. Always on through the business development lens of late. Early in the career, I was really an ad ops guy when I started off at like 22. Then ad ops kind of evolved into product. Then I moved up here to New York from Florida, and business development paid a lot better. Digressing a little bit from how do I introduce myself, but typically that's the general scene.
That's funny. I didn't realize we had kind of the same career arc. So when you think about when you started in ad operations, who opened that first door for you? And what do you think they saw in you as you started to progress and move your way through your career that you may not have even seen in yourself?
Oh, I know the first job out of college I only got because I cracked what I thought was a pretty good joke at the time during the interview. And it was at a company called ClickBooth. So in the affiliate marketing space, nowadays they go by Perform CB. But at the time, it was like, hey, that was a really highly competitive environment. What's your general thesis on making sure that you're willing to rise to the challenge? And I was like, well, one of the wisest philosophers of our time, Ricky Bobby, once said, if you're not first, you're last. Everyone started laughing a little bit and did just well enough to get a little take-home assignment of what is a CPM? Which one of these metrics is performing better? Things like that. But it was a gentleman, Richard Marquez, ended up being one of the groomsmen in my wedding. Now he's the CEO of Rev Content. But there was never a closed door. If I wanted to tackle something, if I was interested in something, there'd be a way to like, hey, let's figure out how to get you involved in the conversation. And at the time, really, we're talking about a company that's being led by 25-year-olds, 28-year-olds, 23-year-olds. So it's a very, young leading the young.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How do you think that freedom to move early in your career informed the way that you operate now that you've grown to the point where you're an executive at an organization like TV Sci, which is also high growth, high pace, fast pace startup?
When you're working with a ton of other young people, there's no preconceived notions of what works, what doesn't work. Why do we do it this way? Well, because it worked, but that doesn't mean we can't do it another way. Have an idea that's better. Like it was a very open door. Let's get on the whiteboard and figure stuff out. We were working and going up against like Taboola and Outbrain, like today, like multi-billion-dollar companies. We were a team of, at the time, like 12 in Sarasota, Florida, right? Incredibly far away from the New York City ad tech scene and agency life and all of that. Our partners were predominantly affiliate advertisers who wanted to figure out the cost per click world instead of the cost per acquisition world. And it was just a really welcoming environment where if you were wrong, all right, no worries. Let's figure out the best path forward. No one wanted to fail. But at the same time, there wasn't this, hey, if you make a mistake, you're on the chopping block type of mindset either. And at the same time, even though everyone was young at the company at the time, with that approach, the level to which people matured in pretty rapid succession was clearly evident, right? Because now we'd be going 12 became 25, which became 50, which became 100 people. And obviously, as you start to grow and the processes that worked for 10 people don't work for 100 people, someone in the company is like, I'll own this. They go, hey, I'm just going to own the entire operational structure of Salesforce and prospecting and this and that. And it was a true blank slate. Let's figure it out.
You touched on a couple of points of culture there too, that people were able to raise their hand. Everybody presumably had a role, but ultimately people were able to go and step up to things. And they did step up to things. And sounds like really that helped drive the growth of the business. And I think that really speaks to culture. Can you talk about the culture a little bit in general, maybe both at Rev Content, but also how you've seen that evolve over your career?
Yeah. I mean, it was working in ad tech in Sarasota, Florida. Like when we went in, we rocked tank tops and board shorts and flops and didn't have to worry about, is there some holdco that we have to cozy up to, or how exactly is the next dollar coming in? But just in general, I would say from Florida to New York was probably a little bit of a culture shock for me, right? I'm coming in with an ad ops and more product background. First gig I took up here was at SSP 33 Across. And I would say probably the gentleman who opened the most doors for me in my career was Chris Meredith over there, who's now over at Autogen. Well, Experian. I like to consider myself like an introverted extrovert, right? The job mandates that I be out, shake hands, kiss babies, go to the events, all of that type of stuff. But it's taxing on me from an energy perspective, right? Chris was the first one that made the concept of networking casual. Let's go have lunch with my friend from this publisher or this publisher. That was a welcome introduction to the world of New York City ad tech. It was also one where I moved from a very fluid environment in Florida, much more laid back, much less structured, to up here where it's like, here's your role, here's your goals. Yet at the same time, there was never this concept of performance versus humanity. I was never just a number that I had to hit. And I think that's an important thing to call out. It's not one or the other, right? Performance should be a byproduct of humanity and empathy.
Let's talk a little bit about TV Scientific more specifically.
Yeah, sure.
Can you give an introduction of what it is, but then also would really like to hear about the different ways in which TV Scientific is a leader in terms of product, in terms of people, in terms of the market. Give us the lay of the land of what the business is doing, but then also the ways in which you think about leadership there.
Now, to summarize it succinctly, we are a performance television platform. So our focus is activating, measuring, and optimizing towards outcomes on the big screen. What started off as your typical media buy, I have my budget, here's the CPMs I'm willing to pay, has now evolved since the company's founding to be so outcome driven that we're willing to bet that we'll be able to drive performance for you as an advertiser. A huge part of our business, and probably the fastest growing, is working with CPA advertisers.
That's interesting.
Who pay TV Scientific on a cost per outcome, not based on the media that they're purchasing.
Is the outcome typically a transaction, or is it something more than that?
It's usually a transaction. Our focus and belief is we need to be a very white box, interoperable platform for if you're a performance advertiser. How do you measure? Are you dropping a pixel on an e-commerce website and you're just checking how many people hit the shopping cart? Are you a mobile gaming company that's using an apps flyer or Singular and Adjust to figure out how many installs am I driving? So our goal isn't to define what is an outcome for you as the advertiser, right? Our goal is to understand what your goal is and then figure out how does TV fit within that mix. TV is very much a performance channel.
Certainly can be,
right?
Yeah.
That's actually the better way to put it.
Yeah.
Certainly can be. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a TV ad, immediately pulled up my phone, went to Google and typed in that company's name. Let me check out the store. Historically, Google's going to get all the credit for that type of behavior because they get the last click coming off Google search, or same thing for within Meta or Snap or other social platforms, right? There's this typical attribution is last click. But our goal is to show that we can drive users down the funnel. Sometimes it's literally the direct purchase. You see the ad has your QR code, you scan the QR code. And I think as ad formats evolve within connected TV, QR codes are kind of being able to be used in a little bit more of a targeted manner. Pause ad, great place for a QR code. You're always going to have the creative up on your screen. It's going to be there. It's not going to disappear. If you're running a 6-second ad, might be a little tough for someone to whip the phone out in time and get it scanned. Our goal is to figure out for any given advertiser that comes and works with us, what can we test and iterate on to improve from their baseline?
So when I first heard what Jason was doing with TVSci, my initial reaction was, I cannot believe this hasn't been done yet, because the proof of concept has been there with direct response advertising for literally 50 years, right? You throw up a phone number, engagement spikes, acquisitions come, they go down, and then the commercial runs again. So the proof of concept's been in front of us for so long that it's one of those things that shocks me. Does TV drive performance? Yes, of course it does. Does it drive brand awareness? Yes, of course it does. It's got so much scale that it can effectively do anything that you want it to do. If I'm remembering correctly, it started as just sort of remnant aggregation and then resale with data layered on it, and now evolved toward the outcome-based business it is today. But it's a fascinating space. It's got tons and tons of volume, both in connected television and linear television. So it's one of those things that has significant legs, I would say.
And I think it's one where, like in linear television, historically, the concept of performance was always tied to price, right? It's not going to perform if it costs me too much money. But in a more deterministic, measurable environment like connected TV, it's not just spike lift of, I saw this ad within 10 seconds, 10,000 people went to my website. In digital, it's almost evolved to this point where you have so many advertisers approaching how they're measuring performance in a different way. Some are using media mix modeling. Others are still using a last view or a last touch attribution or a last click. But specifically within TV and CTV, more specifically, the amount of tools and platforms that now exist that help tie exposure A to outcome B is increasing year over year. 5-7 years ago, there's one mobile measurement partner, and now there's 8 or 9 of them that are in play. And you see all of these organizations being also snapped up, like Flash Talking get acquired by MediaOcean, Innovid getting also bought up. So all of these companies that played in that space still going strong and still offering that. And our goal is to figure out advertiser A, how do you measure performance? And then figure out how do we, as TV Scientific, become interoperable within that framework.
Interoperable is such a great word in that context because it's really extending what they already do in other channels into this channel and really facilitating that for them.
Yeah, and I think the other piece is if you operate within some type of black box methodology, how are you determining that this user actually converted? Well, at the end of the day, it would be pretty easy for the advertiser to look at their own reporting and be like, no, I didn't get a sale. It comes back to an advertiser is going to make decisions based on what their source of truth is. So the more that we're able to operate alongside that as a conduit, the better.
How much education in market do you do around outcome-based television, of course, but what I really mean is outcome-based buying?
Well, if you think about that CPA space, these are people who are historically spending almost all of their money on search or social or pay-per-click, where it's ran ad A, they clicked it, I got the conversion. TV, which has historically been associated with more upper funnel type of awareness. There's a lot of education.
Are your agency people selling to linear television buyers? Are they selling to CTV buyers? Are they selling to some combination of both? To some performance team that may sit outside of those? Like, who's your agency team's target audience?
So most of the work that we do today is brand direct.
Oh, interesting.
So our goal is to work as close as we can with the end advertisers. That said, we do work with performance agencies, less of the major holdco types of partners as it stands today, but really focusing on how they specifically see their business evolving. What are their goals 6 months, year, 2 years from now? When you go directly to the brand is a little bit more streamlined in regards to having to navigate. They have their media plans. They understand exactly what they want to buy, where they want to buy, how much they want to pay for it to work for them. But I would say that the biggest and fastest growing part of our business are the people who haven't touched television before as a potential medium.
Totally makes sense.
And that's where we'd love to continue to dive into the world of folks who funnel money into Meta or search or some of these other pure play performance avenues, there's so much that they don't reach. I'm never on Facebook anymore, right? I'm only on Instagram from a platform perspective. So for me as a user, you're never going to catch me there. I am a cinephile at heart. Like I love watching movies, watching TV. So for me and my consumption patterns as an individual, if you want to get my attention, you're doing it on the big screen, right?
So it sounds like you're doing more education for outcomes-based teams on television than television teams on outcomes. Is that correct?
It really is a healthy mix of both. We do get a lot of first-time CTV buyers who might have bought on linear before. And our goal for them is to more so give them an understanding of, well, spike lift isn't the only measurement option for you.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the inverse, there's a lot of performance-based marketers who are digitally native, who now just for the first time are like, I've always viewed this as an awareness play, but if I was to incorporate this, what does TV do? Is it truly direct response, see the ad, then there's a purchase? Or is it meaningfully influencing the customer journey? Does someone do that classic, saw an ad on TV, go to search, find my brand that way? But there isn't really a one size fits all on the advertiser perspective, because you're also going to have a difference of someone who, take a mattress company, right? Their cost to acquire a new user is a heck of a lot higher than someone selling a pair of shoes, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about those two examples, somebody who's conditioned on or used to doing the spike measurement, what is their second choice if they get past that? And then is it the same for the groups that are more digitally native?
So the more that you're able to collaborate with the brands and agencies that you work with to understand how do you determine what's contributing to your performance or not. And we can give best practices of what some advertisers in similar verticals or that play in a comparable sandbox do. But it is really custom and really bespoke, which means to get that to scale is a very challenging topic, right? So being in at TV Sci and seeing the level of growth that we're having, we're trying to keep up with the way in which the ecosystem is accelerating towards this outcome-driven mindset. Cannes, for example, this past summer, outcome was the buzzword everywhere, right? You had drones in the sky spelling out the word outcome.
That's hilarious.
I think it all probably started really getting traction whenever there's any type of economic uncertainty and people want to understand how much is my advertising budget actually getting me. So you see this flip-flop of maybe a brand that was historically focused on branding is now like, are people actually buying it? Is someone buying it once, or is someone a repeat user and a repeat purchaser? And I think that's just the general theme that we're starting to see is as things become more measurable and attributable, where should I be putting my money to maximize that? And we're lucky to work with brands that understand that in a lot of cases, it's not a only performance or only branding. They realize that there's a balance that needs to be had with both.
You provided a nice segue in here, which is good, because I wanted to shift to this anyway, which is the notion of leading from a position of category strength, right? So setting aside your own competitive set for a second, it's clear that TV Scientific is the leader in what I would call outcomes-based television. Mm-hmm. So from your perspective, there are probably responsibilities, even pressures that come from leading as a leader, right? Leading as a category leader. You talk a little bit about how TV Sci approaches things like innovation versus status quo relative to that category leadership. How do you keep that momentum of growth?
We've all worked in ad tech for a very long time, right? And the only constant is change.
Yeah.
And now with the introduction of AI being a more standard thing that everyone is leveraging across an organization, it's becoming a lot easier to move faster. With all of that lowering the barriers to entry for potential new competitors, companies that are trying to get in the space, people that are trying to crack that same lock, it's innovate or become obsolete. There's no shortage of people who are also looking to get that budget from that advertiser.
Yeah.
And there's a finite amount of money that any individual brand or agency has in regards to what's allocated to them for media spend. You have to constantly be innovating, or at the very least, open up the doors internally to create feedback loops to help you iterate on what you're doing.
So your perspective is you basically have no choice.
I
You
mean,
have to innovate. If you want to quote a movie here, quote Ghostbusters, it's choose or perish, right?
and for us, like that was, you know what? We're going to put our money where our mouth is. Advertiser, pay us on the outcome. We're taking on a ton of risk.
Totally.
With the end goal of, is this media actually going to perform well enough for us to be profitable on that buy? And to our knowledge, no one else is doing that in the space as it stands, definitely not at the scale that we are. And that's allowed us to carve out a nice niche for ourselves. And the fact that we're doing that on open measurement and letting other folks say if this is working or not, and we effectively then take that data set and use that internally to then optimize, change how we buy media, what publishers we're buying, what users we're looking at and serving ads to. That is probably one of the most innovative things that I've come across in my career. A world where everyone is, hey, I'm at this CPM, I have $100,000 to spend. Can you get me 10 cents lower on the price? Don't get me wrong. Of course, our goal is to optimize the cost of media to make it more likely for advertisers to hit their CPA target or their ROAS goal or whatever they're defining as success in their lens. But if we didn't go that route and start to say, hey, I'm pretty confident that we can do all of this media buying on a CPA, we would be one of many connected TV activation platforms.
You're betting on your tech. You're betting on your tech.
Betting on the tech and betting on the people that are making that tech.
Yeah, it's the right way to bet.
There's an immense amount of trust at TV Scientific that everyone who's in their role is going to pull their weight and get the job done. And I think Jason's been an immense leader in that sense, hiring the right people who then can let that type of empowerment cascade down throughout the organization.
What's one of the smallest changes that you've made? And you can think about this in whatever way you want, but smallest changes you've made that's had the biggest impact, either on your business or how you lead.
So previous company that I worked at MadHive, probably the highest performing team that I've been a part of. So our business development team, there were 5 of us, 3 focused on supply, 1 person focused on data partnerships, and then Luke Dumont, our manager, oversaw everything. I'm not a huge guy in regards to let's take this Myers-Briggs personality test and see how does this work. But Luke went to our head of learning internally at MadHive, Megan Pope. We took what I believe is called a Clifton Strengths Assessment. And it was the first one of those types of third-party assessment types of things where I'm looking at the results like, holy shit, this kind of gets me to a T.
Wait, so not to digress, but what were the results?
That was a good one. It was calling out things like fiercely competitive, strategic. I'm very much someone who likes to win others over. So I'm looking at my team and I have a couple of individuals, some who are extremely technical, right? And get that like the back of their hand, and others that are much more personable. Not to say that everyone isn't personable, but that their strength is interacting with others and learning from others and sourcing information and feedback so that we can take that internally and iterate what we're doing on. Doing that little strength assessment made me go from having this thought process of here's how we're going to do things to this more tailored person by person approach. How do you maximize someone's strengths rather than get anybody to improve on their weaknesses?
Yeah, Greg, you and I have actually, I think, had a whole conversation about this.
Conversation.
Where it's not only how do you find the strengths and weaknesses, which actually we've addressed in another episode, believe it or not, like almost in those words. It's also how do you communicate with somebody who thinks differently than you?
Yeah.
How do you connect with someone who may not have the same strengths as you?
There's a point at which you need to be a little bit well-rounded, but I think about it like eating your vegetables. Like there's some things you're going to have to do just because good
want
for
all
you.
the food groups.
Yeah. Doesn't mean you can't have your favorites and try to eat them more often.
I would say that I've been trying to take that learning and implement it as quickly as possible with my team at TV Scientific. But that was one where it was kind of like why was I trying to have this person be a technical ad ops wizard for so long? I did a disservice to them, right? Because that's not what they're interested in necessarily. But it wasn't until I had that sort of exposure to this third-party assessment, it was an aha moment in the sense of, I really can't approach things as a one-size-fits-all. or this path is the best for every individual person.
The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yep.
Yeah. I actually say this quite frequently now, which I think people are getting tired of, which is that I think I'm entering my hippie era, because as I start to think about this stuff, it really is all about like the energy that people put out there and what they feel like. You can see how people excel when they are put in positions as tailored to their strengths. There's no question about it. And part of the responsibility of being a great leader, which you really eloquently just said, is how are you maximizing the strengths of people and allowing them to be put in a position that will grow their career? Their energy changes. You cannot put a square peg in a round hole. I mean, you can, but it's way more effort than just putting it right in the square hole. So yeah, I've done a number of those assessments over the years, and I always come out of them with one or two things that I find so insightful about myself that I just subsume it into my overall perspective on life and go from there.
It's one of those where a good manager, in my personal opinion, knows at some point you're going to want something in your career and progress. And either that's elevating within the company that you work at now or tackling a new opportunity, right? A great manager is the one who's going to put you in the position to do just that based on what's in your best interest. And that's kind of what I'm trying to implement and adhere to myself. Sometimes easier said than done, right? Especially when there's both internal and external pressures, as we said, when that concept of performance versus
outcome.
Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely been a great journey so far.
Nice. Last question. What is the thing you're most looking forward to as you look forward to the end of the year?
My son's first birthday. Just had to plug that one.
Love
All
it.
right,
Just
one
in
more.
case the missus is going to watch this one.
That's right.
But no, from now to the end of the year, for me, it's going to be like we've been on a tear on this concept of guaranteed outcomes, paying based on if it works. We announced that in Cannes. So we're continuing to see how that culminates and what does this actually manifest itself as we get closer to the end of the year is really exciting times for sure. So I think that's probably, for me and all of the folks at TVSci, probably where our focus is. And it's great because everyone's pulling in the same direction, right? There's an alignment and there's an understanding of where we want to go. How do we get there? And that starts from the top down.
Yeah.
That starts with our senior leadership.
I mean, that's such a perfect example of where you're leading and taking the industry and taking the business. So love
And
it.
I would say a perfect ending.
I agree.
Thanks so much, Nick.
Yeah,
This
thank
was really
you.
great.
Leadership In is hosted and produced by Jeff Wallenitz and Greg McDonald. This episode was recorded at Podstream Studios in New York City, and we'd like to give special thanks to the amazing studio team and to Jess DeWeese for production support. Please follow the show in your favorite podcast app, and if you have questions or know someone who'd make a great guest, we'd love to hear from you at leadershipinpodcast@gmail.com.